everyone, and welcome back to our discussion on things to consider. And it is me, Veronica and Karen. And
Hi.
our topic today, again, as I said in the last video, that our topics are going to originate from this thought post or this hashtag BB thoughts. I think that's what I hashtag it as on my Instagram. And this one I had here, I think I posted it 2 years ago as well. And it says, there is a freedom in meeting people's thoughts with calmness, clarity, and a want for understanding than with hate and dismissal. And I honestly cannot remember when my mind was exactly when I wrote this, but I think I was thinking about how we automatically meet people's thoughts with hate, especially things that we do not understand. And I feel like it puts us in an emotional jail. An argument or a discussion that you had with someone where you did not agree kind of like goes with you throughout your whole day. And then like it almost has you like in this trap, and it's like when you meet them with like calmness and like you actually want to understand, it's almost like freeing in some type of way, like because it's like you still learn. And I think as human beings, that's something that we should be striving to do every day, because I'm sure you did learn something from the situation, even if you did not agree with everything, but you still learn something. And then I feel like it's sort of freeing, in maybe that is the wrong word to use, but it feels like a kind of freedom, like a lightness when you could have a conversation with somebody and not necessarily agree with everything they say 100%, but then like you could still walk away and be like, okay, all right, but I still think what I think.
Exactly.
And let me just point out before we start the discussion, I'm not talking about people opinions that are like non-progressive or prejudiced. Like I'm talking about things in general, and I'm also talking about not just opinions but people's characteristics, because obviously their opinions will come from their mind, from their character, from their traits. So I'm talking about like, well, eventually we'll get to this, but I'm talking about like how persons have different personalities, and like every time we meet up with someone that doesn't have the same thing as ours, we kind of resist. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's a human thing, and it's because we're used to assimilation. I don't know what it is. Let's get into it.
Yeah, well, I think your question is a really, really good one. And what it does for me is it makes me think about, how people struggle with communication. And a lot of times we hear this thing about people, we talk about when they're having dialogue back and forth and how people are not really listening because they're plotting and planning their response. And I think one of the challenges in terms of what you said about being able to meet other people's thoughts and opinions with calmness and clarity is that there's a suggestion that the best way to approach a situation is to be open, to be non-judgmental, and that allows you to operate in a space of receptivity where, okay, you're willing to hear what's being communicated, you're willing to hear what's being shared. And I too agree with you. One of my mantras around the office, and I say all the time within my clinic and the people I work with, we don't have to agree in order to work together effectively. There is a way to respectfully agree to disagree. But I think the challenge comes in is because quite often our mind is always made up. We are so very clear and resolute in our opinions and our thoughts that we don't leave any room for anything else to be presented. We don't leave room for anything else to be considered, which of course is the title of our discussion. But it's like, because we are so closed off, we have that challenge that we don't even begin to approach anybody with calmness and clarity, because we are so fixed. But I think that's a human quality. I'm not quite sure how much of that is particularly for the population of people of color or minorities, but I think it's really an issue of humanity where we are so fixed in who we are that not that we don't leave room, we've not left any room for us to engage and be enlightened or to be exposed to anything else. I don't think a lot of times that happens because being fixed is a defense mechanism. It protects. because there are many people that would be shattered if what they believe, their core beliefs or whatever, are challenged in any kind of way. So people like, I've got to have this staunch, fixated presentation, and which doesn't leave me any room to hear or consider what you might want to share, what you might want to say. And I think that's a defense mechanism. I mean, in my experience, that's what I would call that.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, everybody would say this too, but I think also with media and stuff, and everything is about me, and a lot of focus is always on you and the way you feel, and people usually prioritize that over everything, even over the conversation, even over the priority of trying to understand. Like, they just put themselves over that, and it's like, it is a hot mess. But one of the usually end up turning into that because you I don't know how to say, like, it's almost like a selfish thing. Like, I feel this right now and I feel enraged, and it's my right to feel this way, and and then, like, miss the point. The conversation is to come to an understanding so we could move forward. We're not really solution oriented a lot of the time.
There you go. And I think what I would add to that too is that often we have this fear of the unknown, of the unfamiliar, and we are already assuming, quite often as humans, that there's something wrong with what's unfamiliar to me. There's something wrong with something that is different from what I know. So that really contributes to the fact that we aren't open when we are communicating often, or when we're just having exchanges with people, because we're so fixed. But again, I believe that's a defense mechanism, because when core beliefs are shattered and are challenged and confronted, and there's evidence that, would dispel our core belief, I mean, that really changes a person on the inside. And people are going to be cautious and careful. All they have is their foundation.
I think we feel a certain type of way because we don't want to believe that the thing we've been believing for so long is not true. But the irony is, you will get to know the truth, I guess, or get to know closer to what you think you believe is the truth, if you just listen to understand, which I find is funny. So I asked a question, and we always try to tie it back into our topics back into the Black community, and I asked persons, do you believe that the Black race as a collective has a lesser tolerance for diversity within the race? And I know it was kind of off topic from, the BB thought, but I think it's where one of the issues that we have, I feel like, in the Black community, and I do not know if this has to do with an identity issue, that when it comes to people within the race that exhibit characteristics that are not typical, or the quote unquote, I don't want to say the standard, there's no standard, but I mean that are not typical, that's the right word, or what people think is typical of the Black race, they're all of a sudden met with hate and dismissal in some type of way. Most of the time that comes off the first thing is the physical characteristic as it pertains to color. That's the first thing, and we see that a lot with the light skin versus dark skin thing. But I was more specifically thinking about characteristic traits. And for example, I was thinking of Childish Gambino. Do you know who he is?
Yes, I'm familiar with him. Yes, I am.
Right. I think he said more than once that he had issues I don't know if he said that specifically, but I would think he did have issues getting into the rap circle, because he did not have a lot of things familiar with most of the rappers. Because when you think, what we see as a rapper right now is somebody from the hood, like they grew up poor and they made it and they bought their mother a house, that kind of stuff. And he was saying that he grew up in the middle class or something like that, and he doesn't know how to relate to that, and he kept getting words thrown at him like he corny, or he not a real nigga or whatever, he not a real rapper either, because he had no pain or something to that effect. And one of the things we do here as well is, if somebody is an introvert I sure they do that overseas, but there's this word we use stoosh, like you too stoosh, like as if like, you know, I could go out. I would love to go out and like to see people. But if I standing up in a corner, like do not force me to dance or make me feel like I have to dance or whatever to make you feel comfortable. Is not even, and in making me feel uncomfortable in the moment because I don't want to be called stoosh. You know, like it's, I don't know. And I think obviously there's an issue within all the different races and factions there. You know, anything, I think, as you said earlier on, as humans, we do have that issue of like when things are different from us, like it's like we don't know how to process it. But I just think I do not know if it's more significant within the Black race because we fighting for our identity and our voice so much that when within us there's an issue, like it's this big issue. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I will say this. This is very broad, so I'm going to try to really respond in a way that, you know, is as close to what you're addressing. But one of the first things I will say is that when people are really comfortable with themselves and who they are, then they have a greater capacity to not interfere with or allow other people to be comfortable with themselves and who they are. So I think the biggest challenge that we see in this not meeting difference with calmness and not seeking clarity is that quite often we are not comfortable with who we are, or we're not sure of ourselves. And so we're going to resist anything that is unfamiliar and uncommon. And we're going to be more inclined, in the example that you just gave, to try to pull people into our comfort zone versus engaging with them in their comfort zone. And so the thing is, everybody's seeking their own comfort. Now that's a big issue. Everybody is seeking their own comfort, which means my comfort is going to differ from yours. So what I'm seeking might infringe upon you, and what you're seeking might infringe upon me. So when we get to a place where we are comfortable with ourselves and we respect that we have the right to be, then that is how we will be able to operate with other people. When we are not in that place, then we are going to challenge diversity. We're going to challenge what is different. We're going to challenge what is not the norm, what has not been made the norm. And I get your point about, I think what I'm saying very closely ties to your point about fighting for identity, because people are struggling to affirm who they are and determine who they are by their own standards, that people are ready, willing, and aggressively resisting anything that does not align with who they see themselves as. And so that's going to put people at odds with others. And so, I mean, again, it's really broad. When we say diversity, I mean, it could be, as you mentioned, like the skin issue. It can be people's personal interests, like what interests me doesn't interest someone else. But, you know, in terms of trying to have an openness, I think some degree of comfort within oneself is required to be open to other people. And so what I then say is that a lot of people don't have peace with themselves that would allow them to be open and non-judgmental and receptive to others, particularly those who are different. And a lot of internal work has to be done, I think, for people to be at that place. And that's not an easy process. In my opinion, it's not easy. It requires a lot of self-examination and self-acceptance, and those are things that people struggle with.
And as we're on the topic of communication, and we're going into a different, it's still related, and I guess I'd love to get your take on this. Okay. But I thought, as you were speaking, a thought that just came to my mind, or a term that just came to my mind is responsibility in communication, or communication responsibility. I do not know. But we know those persons who are in communications, we know that there's a message, there's a sender, there's a medium for the message, and then there's a receiver. And at any point, and if I remember correctly, at any point along that line from sender to receiver, there could be an issue with communication. Mm-hmm. So it could be an issue with the sender, with the medium, or with the on the receiving end. Now, I like to particularly think that if the message is originates from the sender, they have more responsibility on how it's delivered than the person who is receiving it. So I'm asking your opinion on it, but I also want us to talk about, or you could just give your thoughts on how those two persons share responsibility in communicating. And a lot of the time, we see this a lot, like even when people don't hear them, like people don't like to apologize, especially the sender of the message. They rather put more blame on the receiver. When I'm like, you the one that was trying to get me to understand this message, and you poorly communicated it in the first place. But I do still think that the receiver has some kind of control as well if they realize the emotional immaturity of the sender.
Okay.
Kind of have some type of control as well in the situation.
And what I would add to that is that I think effective communication requires a certain degree of selflessness. And what I mean by that is that the person with the message, my assumption is that the person who has the message sees value in what they're trying to communicate, and therefore has a commitment to the message being able to not just be heard, but received. And so what that makes me think of is the fact that the sender or the one who's initiating communication needs to know their audience. They need to know who they are communicating with, so that they will deliver the message that they obviously value, that they will deliver that message in a manner or in a method that can be received, that can be understood by the intended recipient. So if I believe that my message has value, what I'm trying to communicate, then I'm going to be invested in knowing my audience and knowing how they receive, what they respond to, what they're most likely to understand, because I agree with you. The onus and the responsibility is on the person who has the message. It's not on the receiver. But the thing is, effective communication, the reason I believe it requires selflessness is because people will have to step out of the role of, well, I'm just going to say this. Because a lot of times when we communicate with people, we're not really concerned often if they receive it. We just want to get people told. We want to give them a piece of our mind. But when you have a real investment in your message, you're equally invested in whether or not the message will be received. And to me, that is the hallmark of someone who's an effective communicator, because they're not just concerned about the message, they're concerned about the delivery of the message and the receptivity. Because if the message is not received, what good is it? You can have great information, valuable information, life-altering information, but if you don't deliver it in a manner that will allow it to be received, or use a method that is understood or respected or valued by your receiver, all of your efforts are for naught. So I agree. There's a great responsibility on the initiator. And I would add to that part of that responsibility includes selflessness, and it requires that they know who they are speaking to. You have to know your audience. If you don't know your audience, you almost are like wasting your time with your communication. Because knowing your audience will confirm what method you need to use, what approach you need to take. And a lot of times, people are not invested in that. Well, then that tells me that you're also not equally invested in your message.
Yeah. And another, something else that you see, we see a problem with the sender of the message is, and you kind of mentioned something like that earlier on, and then it ties back into the selfishness, where they're like, this is how I am. And again, they're not really concerned with the message or the receiver, because most of the times I feel like if we are concerned with the person and how they're receiving it, your message will be more effective because you're trying to get it to that person. So it doesn't matter. Well, okay. I was going to say it doesn't matter how you send it, but it does matter.
It always matters. Yes.
Yeah, but it matters. It doesn't matter how you feel or how you would take it.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how you feel about your message. It matters how they feel about your message.
And how you deliver it. Because a lot of the times in relationships especially, you see persons keep using their excuse like, this is just how I am, and that's how I was raised, and this is how I talk. And I used it before in the past too, but I realized like it doesn't. Yeah, it's an excuse. It's an excuse, and really the investment should be in the listener. And I guess that's how we speak about love languages too. A lot of people love people in the way that they want to be loved, but not the way that the person wants to be loved.
Exactly.
And our relationships, any way you look at it, all our relationships has to do with selflessness. Selflessness?
Selflessness, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, at the end of the day, it always, whether some
If you
part
want,
of the relationship comes back to that.
and that's if you want the relationship to be successful. If you don't care
Right.
about the outcome of the relationship, or if you don't care about the outcome of your message, then selflessness is not required. But the person who has value in the relationship and has value and believes in the value of the message, they're going to be concerned about delivery and receptivity, because that's where your impact is going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be the impact is going to be in delivery and receptivity. And when you don't care about those two things, then you get the kind of outcomes you can expect.
And I'm guessing that's where you do your research as a sender. I guess a tool you could use to anybody watching this video, wanting to know how they could be a more effective sender of a message. I mean, really, as you said, know your audience, or know your partner, know your sister, know your brother, whoever it is that you're speaking to. Try to, and then most of the times I feel like we're afraid to ask questions a lot of the time in all types of relationships. Like any question that would make us seem like we're less knowledgeable for some reason. Like as we said the last time, I think we were talking about making your intentions known in a relationship.
Yes.
Like a lot of times we want to go for relationships and just have it, like, not talk about it because it seems faker, like, in a way, like, you know.
And one of the things I remember we talked about, at least that I mentioned, is that language is important, because what you say sets the tone. So the thing is, we have to create, and then we were talking about Black men in this particular instance, we have to create an environment where they feel comfortable to express. It's the same thing, whether it's relationship, intimate relationship focus, or just exchanges. We have to create an environment where when they receive the message, there's going to be some level of comfort to have inquiry, to ask for clarity, some degree of comfort where people won't be embarrassed if they don't completely understand. Like, we have to be concerned about how the message is received. And when you are concerned and you create an atmosphere where there's going to be a dialogue versus then a diatribe where someone's just espousing. For me, I think the goal should be dialogue. Well, quite often when people are talking to each other, the goal in the end game is diatribe. Sit here and listen to me. Not let's have an exchange and develop understanding. And so that's where language and delivery method come together. Language, what you choose to say, and how you choose to deliver what you choose to say, creates the opportunity for dialogue. And a lot of times when people have selfish agendas, like, I just want to be heard, I just want to get this off my chest, I just need to tell you about yourself, then selfish agendas don't really lend to building an atmosphere where there's going to be free-flowing dialogue, because someone's going to get shut down. And it's typically the person on the receiving end when there's no investment in the delivery of the message. Now, that's my perspective, because I'm always thinking most effective communication. Well, let's talk about this in terms of effective communication. This is the biggest one for me. People have to check the motive. You've got to check your motive. What is your why? What is your motivation for what you're communicating? If people would individually check their motivation before they speak, before they relay a message, there's an opportunity to examine your delivery. There's an opportunity to examine your language and get those two things right before you proceed. Because motivation makes a big difference in what you actually do. And if people would become invested in checking themselves and trying to say, hey, why am I doing this? Why? What's the reason? What is my why? That would impact language and delivery. But most people are not concerned about their own motivation. They're concerned about someone accepting what they said. So if I were to suggest a tool, the first thing I would tell someone to do, if you want to be an effective communicator, first check your motive for communicating. Why are you doing this?
All right.
When we answer why, we answer a lot of questions, and we also have an opportunity to resolve a lot of potential conflict, misunderstanding, and all of that when we check our motive.
And even in the moment, like let's say if there's like because sometimes you could be in a heated argument, and then it could still turn into a productive, I guess, discussion.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, but then like I would even suggest like the actual physical thing to do is like walking away. I used to feel like that wasn't like no, we need to talk about this now, like, you know. But then yeah, just taking some time, and as you said, to really think about what you want to say and how you want to say it, and again keeping in mind who the receiver is and stuff like that. But I know some persons might be frustrated, especially if the other person is not invested in the communication in the same way.
Now that's a big thing, investment. Yeah. Because first of all, if one person has an investment and someone else doesn't, you can pretty much bet that communication is going to primarily fall by the wayside. And see, investment to me also speaks to how we value who we're communicating with. And if we don't have investment, then to me that speaks to the fact that we don't properly value them. And that's a different issue. That's so far away and separate from effective communication.
And you know, and then as you said, value, not just on the person, but also on yourself. And I think I'm about to maybe mention another, I don't want to say it's a tool. I guess it is a tool, but it's something that you need to keep in mind as well. A lot of the time we like to talk the talk, but we don't know how to implement. We don't know how to walk it.
Yes.
And like recently I was having a conversation. There was a misunderstanding with me and a person that I've known for a while. Like I feel like, you know, we've communicated well in the past. We share the same kind of ideals, principles, and in most respects. And like a lot of the things, when we got into the discussion and the disagreement, a lot of these principles and ideals on the person's side, kind of in my mind, it went out of the window, because it's like he was communicating to me like, the way you feel don't make sense, and this and and I'm like, don't we always talk about emotions and respecting people's emotions? And didn't you just tell me the other day one of the first things people do is like when somebody acts a certain type of way they don't understand, the first thing we say is like they're crazy.
Yeah,
like they just act.
What we do is we
just said that to me 2 weeks ago or something like that, and I'm like, you're doing the exact thing to me. So I guess the tool would be like, just really, really, like, just ask yourself, are you invested in being a good communicator? Do you value yourself so that you could come off as a good communicator? And I felt like a little proud of myself because I did stay calm. One of my mottos for life, recently I came up with this and my husband just took it and started running with it. But I always say calm tones and simple truths. I think this BV thought was kind of coming off that as well. So like calm tones, simple truth, always get somebody to shut up. It doesn't matter, like somebody could be irate and and then you just calm and just give them a simple truth to the matter. They cannot reject it. You know, we thrive on in miscommunications. We thrive on complications and stuff like that.
An effective communicator too is going to be looking for potential areas of conflict. They're going to be aware of the possibility of conflict. So they're going to be attuned to that. Like, where is there possibility for misunderstanding? Where is there possibility for confusion? Where will I need to provide extra clarification so that this is not misinterpreted? An effective communicator is examining their communication from the beginning to the end. They're looking at all aspects of it, which means they're examining themselves because they're the initiator. Again, to me, it still very much ties to motivation. and it very much ties to selflessness, and it very much ties to whether or not they value their own message. Because if you value it, you're gonna value whether or not it can be received, which means you're gonna examine it along the way.
And I think too, in communication, we have a lot of defense mechanisms. I think we mentioned that earlier. And in the same example, it had me thinking about that as well, because the miscommunication came from neither one of us. It came from a technical glitch that happened.
So there was an assumption somewhere.
Yeah. And then I pointed out that blame was put on me when I just said there was a glitch. And then, like, you know, blame is a heavy word for people, and I mean, like, really, that's what it is. Like, you did, even if you didn't say you did this, or I am blaming you, you did kind of say, like, you know, and this kind of things irritate me, because it's like, when I know I have nothing to do with this, and then you try and pin this on me, like, even if and it was a simple thing, and I realized, like, there was a lot of weird things that were happening in the conversation where, like, there's a lot of laughter, there was a lot of, like, repetition of the same things, like, I don't understand, and I'm like, but I'm trying to explain to you, you keep saying you don't understand, but you're not listening to understand. And there was something else that came to my mind, you know, I was just saying it. If I remember, I'll tell you, but with that situation, it was just.
And I think another thing that contributes to what you just said about how communication is misunderstood and all of that is that I say this a lot to people. Our private thoughts about people, what we personally and privately think about people, it comes out in our interactions with them. And so if we have low opinion, or if we question someone's intellect, or if we think someone's not competent, or if we don't personally like someone, when things like that happen, we're going to be quick to blame. We're going to be quick to point the finger, because our own private, negative, unhealthy thoughts about that person will rise to the surface, because here's an opportunity for me to really act on what I really think and feel about you. So that's why I often tell people, you have to be very careful about your private thoughts about people. You think folk don't know, but it's going to come out in your interactions with them.
It's true. That is true. And that's a good thing to look out for too. If you really want somebody to know how you feel about them, like, you know.
Yes.
Okay, one of the things that happens a lot in conversations, and that actually takes it from 0 to 100, and that kind of happened in my confrontation thing I was just speaking about, where, like, the continuation of telling somebody to calm down, that's one, or telling them, like, this is a small thing, why are you making a big deal? And then you keep having to defend yourself to say, like, I am calm. Like, stop telling me to calm down, I'm calm. And then the more you say it, is like, okay, now I'm not calm anymore. You know, and then, or if you tell me, like, this is small, this is trivial, this is, like, who are you to say that? Like, calm down, like, you calm down. And
people are quick to respond dismissively and antagonistically. See, that's an attempt to reduce somebody. And that's all that is. It's an attempt to reduce you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to dismiss your concerns, and I'm going to antagonize you, poke and prod at you until I get a rise, because that is not someone with a pure or good intention towards someone. That's somebody with an agenda.
Yeah, I agree fully. Like, I feel like it doesn't matter, like, if somebody, I feel just dismissing, as I said, like, just dismissing somebody is it shows that you do not care, no matter how small they feel, because people's feelings about things, you cannot tell them why they feel a certain way. You don't know how many years of whatever experience that led them to feel what they're feeling in that moment. So you trivializing the experience, you trivializing their life experiences, the things that they went through. That's what I believe. That is something that's triggering to make it go to that level.
Yeah. And I think that kind of behavior is very intentional. People know what they're doing when they're dismissive, when they antagonize, when they attempt to minimize or reduce the significance of something for someone else. It's very intentional. They have a goal in mind. And you know, obviously it's a sign of someone who's inconsiderate, But to me, it always speaks volumes about what that person thinks privately about who they're dealing with. Because if you valued who you were dealing with, if you properly respected who you were dealing with, then you would think twice about being dismissive and antagonistic. But when you don't care, you don't care. And that comes across, and that's very clear in interactions. And I think, again, with us initially talking about not just effective communication, but being able to manage differences and things of that nature, and being able to embrace diversity and change and difference. When you don't have good, pure thoughts about people, when your thoughts about people are negative and unpleasant and all of that kind of stuff, it's going to be incredibly difficult to embrace change or diversity or difference. And so that's why I said earlier that a large part of this is people getting to a place where they're completely whole and comfortable with themselves. Because if you get to that place for yourself, B, you're going to want me to get to that place for myself, and you're not going to participate in reducing me. Because you've achieved something that is of value, and you see that value, and you would want that value for other people.
Yeah.
But that requires a lot of internal work. That's not going to just happen overnight. That's not an osmosis process. That's something that is very intentional and requires work.
Yeah, that's why I was really surprised. It just really opened my eyes to what this relationship is supposed to be. Yeah, so that's pretty much the topic. Do you have any final words, Karen?
Yes, I would definitely say that effective communication requires you to check your motivation, to be concerned about your message, and to know your audience so that you can tailor the method for their benefit. That's what I want to leave you with. Thank you.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you for tuning into our discussion. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or your opinions on our topic today, communication, and meeting people's thoughts with calmness and clarity and a want for understanding. So as usual, keep your intentions pure, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.